Hey folks, what I have here today is a 3D quad, the multi-Wii board and some Simon K speed controllers that have been flashed with that firmware that allow for reversing of the motors and 3D flight with that ability. This video's intent or purpose is to sort of serve as a quick start guide, so to speak, just to get you in the air quickly and easily with as little fuss as possible with the equipment that's used here, or if you have any similar equipment. What this video is not, it's not to serve as a full manual or understanding of any of this hardware or software firmwares that are used. I strongly suggest for correct function and safety that you have a very good grasp and understanding of all this hardware and firmwares or softwares that are used to get this thing flying nicely, safely, and smoothly. But again, this video will serve as sort of a quick start guide to help get you put all this information together that you've already gathered and your understandings to kind of get you in the air quickly and easily. Basically, this is going to go in 3 sections, this quick start. Section 1 will cover preparing your Spectrum transmitter for this multi-rotor. Section 2 will covering specifically the binding of the satellite receiver for use with this multi-rotor. It's a little bit different of a setup here than the standard, so that's going to be broke down into section 2 and explained there. And finally, we'll end in step 3 or section 3, which will basically cover how the multi-Wii board and the Simon K speed controllers and the firmware, everything kind of talks to each other and works, and what needs to be done to make that work nicely and smoothly for you. And also that section will also cover the proper rotations of the motors. All right, so that should be sum it all up there. Let's go ahead and get started. And okay, folks, this is going to be section 1. This section basically covers preparing your transmitter for use with the 3D reversible rotation motors on this quad. The radio I'll be using for the setup purposes here is a standard Spectrum DX8 transmitter. If you have a DX7S, it's going to set up very similar, or an older DX7 or DX6 or etc. You can look into your manual for features that will allow you to set it up to work similar to this. But as I said, this is going to work. This setup is on a DX8 transmitter. Basically, the first step we're going to do is to set this into a helicopter mode. The reason why I like helicopter mode for these airframes is that your throttle hold is going to be in a position. These reversible rotation propeller quads work a lot like a collective pitch helicopter, so having a throttle hold up in the same location as you might on a helicopter for throttle hold works out very convenient. And how we're going to do that basically is we're going to power down the radio here and hold down the scroll selector as we power up. And we're going to go into, after you found the model and which model you want to set it on, we will be going to model type to begin with. We're going to set that up as a helicopter, and after that you're going to need to tell it what type of swash. Swash type is going to be set at 1 servo normal. There's a couple other selections there, 1, 2, and 3 servos, but it's 1 servo normal, which is actually on this firmware for this radio, it's the default setting. So that's going to work nicely. Also, under the system setup menu here, we're going to go into switch select, and for the purposes of this video, to keep things simple, we're going to basically inhibit all the switches for now, except for and we're going to inhibit this, inhibit that, channel, and switch. Inhibit everything except for 1. I'm going to go back and go to the flight mode, no, the throttle hold switch, which is right here. We're going to set that to the gear channel. The purpose of that means that when we activate the throttle hold switch, which is this switch here, this back switch, which our helicopter pilots are accustomed to using for their throttle hold, basically what that's going to be doing is since we have sent that switch to the gear channel, as denoted here, hold is set to the gear channel. What that's going to do is it's going to toggle the endpoints on the gear channel, which is critical for the way this multi-wii firmware works. The only way to shut the motors off is going to be by toggling via the gear channel. And like I said, we have sent it to that throttle hold switch, basically because these things fly so similar to collective pitch helicopters in the way that they work. That tends to work out really well, especially if you're coming from a collective pitch helicopter flying. Okay, and that is going to basically get you through the basically this system setup. Let's get out of this part of the menu. Now we're going to be in here. We're going to go into the function list and go to servo setup. We need to reverse 2 of the channels here. So we're going to toggle to travel, and we're going to reverse. Go to reversing, and we are going to reverse 2 channels. The only 2 channels that will be reversed here are aileron. So we'll select aileron. Oops, select aileron. Go down, select it, reverse it. Excellent. Go back up. The only other channel that gets reversed is going to be rudder. So we're going to select it, go down, select, reversed. Great. All right, and that is going to complete the servo reversing functions under the function list that we'll need to do. Now, as far as leaving your EPAs, which another term for that is your travels, for all intents and purposes, to keep things simple in this video, everything is going to be left at 100%. Also, until you fly the machine, leaving the items at 100% on your travels will give you kind of a baseline indicator of how you want to how the machine flies, and you can make adjustments thereafter and tailor the setup with expos or rates of rotation via your radio, or the correct way would be to go into the multi-wii and also make the correct adjustments there to tailor the feel of the machine to your liking. But anyway, so basically we're going to leave the travels at 100%, and dual rates, expos, all that stuff, we're leaving all that linear, 100% straight across. And that is going to basically complete this section of the setup here for radio setup. Okay, folks, section 2 here is going to cover real quickly. It's pretty simple. It's the binding procedure for binding your satellite receiver to function with the current 3D reversed rotation quads here. Basically, the current format that we have in use here is going to be on the multi-wii. It only uses the satellite receiver. And it's really nice because you're able to ditch the bird's nest that's associated with all the patch wires going from the standard receiver on a small light quad. It's going to help you get rid of all that bird's nest of wires and keep things really simple and clean and uncluttered and light. Keeps weight off of the machine, which is always a good thing for things that are flying. Anyhow, so what you're going to be doing, since we're only going to be using a satellite, you say, well, how do I get that to bind? Pretty simple and easy. Common sense would denote it. You're basically going to bind it with one of your standard full-size receivers here. Once this is bound as normally, like a normal, it's going to be used in a normal setup. Once this is fully bound, you then unplug it, and you're going to be plugging this into the little provided patch cable that's on the quad, and it will function just as though it's on a full-size receiver. But like I said, what you do is you just go through your normal binding process, bind it up. I've got a 2-cell LiPo here. I'm going to power this up with. This LiPo is hooked to a regulator, 6-volt regulator. Make sure your voltage range is all happy with the equipment you're using. Again, consult your manuals for all this hardware and firmware and whatnot. And just bind it as normal. Plug this guy in here. We've got some lights that blink at us telling we're in a binding mode. Pretty simple binding. I already had it selected on the model I wanted to bind for this machine. And hold down the bind button, power on. And Heli's binding. and voila. Yeah, the lights go solid. Everything is bound. Very good. And basically, so from there, you can now disconnect your power and your bind plug, and disconnect this. And what you're going to end up with now is you'll be getting rid of all this stuff and the bird's nest that would associated with that and clutter, and you'll have a nice, clean, simple setup. And this is going to get plugged into the small patch cord that's provided that comes off of the multi-Wii, and it keeps things really simple, light, and clean, like I said. One item I also wanted to mention with regards to the use of a single satellite receiver on this. While you have the benefit of losing a lot of the wires and the clutter and the weight that go along with full-size receiver, unfortunately, the downside is you do lose the functionality of the failsafe. So again, when you're using a standalone receiver, a standalone satellite receiver, you will lose this failsafe functionality. So basically what's going to happen is in the extremely unlikely event that there's a break in the radio transmission or the radio turns off or whatever, the failsafe, what I'm seeing is when I have just this plugged in to the multi-rotor, what I'm seeing is that last seen signal seems to hold. That's what the multi-Wii seems to be doing with the information. It just stays on the last seen signal. So just something I wanted to note with regards to the use of a single satellite receiver for a receiver on this 3D quad. All right.